Ladies and gentlemen, Ming the Merciless 93 here, making another video for PokerVIP.com. Going to be reviewing the play today of J.R. Hartley 147 playing 10-0 on Unibet. And without further ado, let's just jump on into the action. We got a fold here with the Jack 8 on table 3. Just for you guys out there, it's going to be table 1, 2 on the top and then 3, 4 on the bottom so we can follow the action. Because sometimes, you know, the hands might be the same, whatever else. You know how it goes. You know how it goes. So we have Jack 8 here, and this is a playable hand. I would like to see a raise here in the small blind. You know, you don't have to go crazy with it. You don't have to be raising Jack 5 offsuit, but Jack 7 offsuit makes a straight, and I'm definitely going to be raising at least around Jack 7 here and some suited jacks with a lower kicker. But Jack 8 is definitely too strong. The only time I would be folding this is if you know that your opponent is a beast. You know, if you know that this guy's playing very well and he's 3-betting at a high frequency and he's just making your life miserable in position, maybe then you have a world where you can go ahead and play a little bit tighter, have a little bit stronger of a range in the small blind. But for the most part, you definitely want to go ahead and attack, and you don't want to give your opponent the credit of having those traits without having him show you that he has that ability, and he not only has that capability, but he's willing to use it. Maybe not, you know, yesterday's session. Let's see him use it today. So just go ahead and raise that Jack 8 offsuit in the small blind there. The same thing up here with the King Jack, but I'm kind of assuming that we're going to be raising this. I'd like to see a 3x raise. I don't really particularly like 2.5. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's fine on the button. I think it's okay in general, but I don't really want to give my opponent who's in position any reason to play more hands against me because he's at a pretty big advantage. So playing tighter and using a smaller raise size would be a reasonable strategy in the small blind since you have less garbage hands, and that's going to mean that you have more equity post-flop for that smaller size when you get called more. But I'd rather just 3x it and attack a bit more frequently. We got pocket queens down here. We're going to go ahead and isolate this guy. A little pot size raise. I'm going to slap the pot button. 40 cents. That's good enough. 45. I like it. And we're definitely going to continuation bet here. We have a ton of ace-x combos. I don't really see a reason to check. When your opponent is in the big blind and you've made it 2.5x preflop for table 2, there's going to be so many combinations of hands that are going to have to fold here. Think about it like this. Some frequency, he's going to 3-bet. He doesn't have ace-king that often. There's only 9 combos in the deck. That's going to get 3-bet most of the time. Ace-queen's going to get 3-bet a lot. Ace-jack's going to get 3-bet a lot. The flat-calling ace-x combos he has are going to be like ace-deuce offsuit. A lot of the suited aces are going to be 3-bet preflop as well. So does he have ace-4, ace-deuce, ace-3, ace-5, you know, probably up to ace-7, ace-8. He's got a bunch of garbage aces. Don't get me wrong. But think about all of the other combos in this spot that you're just going to get folds from. And once you take a checking line with a hand like this, I'm assuming you're at least check calling the flop. I wouldn't really put a check raise in here. I think check calling would be okay. He just never has a set of aces. He never has a set of 10s. You know, the board favors you. He might not even have ace-10 depending on his 3-bet frequency. And ace-4 is really his only 2-pair combo aside from the occasional ace-10 that flat called. And maybe, you know, it's hard to say for each individual player. But I just want to go ahead and continuation bet this. Got the gut shot, going to be able to double barrel here a good bit when he does call. You know, he's going to have like 4x suited. He's going to have 4 or 5 suited and just call. He's going to have 10x. He's going to have similar combinations of gut shots like yours. He's going to have, I mean, king queen often gets 3-bet. I mean, it kind of depends on what his 3-bet versus flat calling frequency is here in the big blind, but there's going to be a lot of combinations here that are going to be able to call the flop and then fold the turn. Now, you do have the jack of clubs, which means there'll be a few less floats on this board. Same thing with the king of hearts, because the bottom of your opponent's range that well, an opponent that isn't getting crazily out of line, they're often going to have 3-card backdoor wraps in this spot. So let's say my opponent has 8, 9 of spades. They're probably going to float this flop a decent % of the time. Not every opponent, not always, but having the jack of clubs and having the king of hearts does block some backdoor floats here as well. So he doesn't have as many 3-card combos, you know, like a, you know, whatever combos are going to be like a straight or a flush on the turn of the river. So it's going to be even more likely that you get this through rather than if you had king jack of diamonds, for instance, and then he would have all of the backdoor floats he could have with those combos. So it's this is a pretty good spot. Just go ahead and continuation bet. You know, you can make it 28 cents. I mean, you don't have to make it a huge amount. You don't have to bet 36 cents here. It's a relatively dry board texture, and you could even, against some straightforward opponents, make a slightly smaller bet. But the point is that your opponent has position. You have a gut shot to the nuts. The board texture is definitely favorable for you in that you have everything on the board that's nutted, and he caps out at some ace-10 combos. Doesn't really have aces or 10s here very much at all. And of course, pocket fours, obviously. But yeah, you just have a lot of favorable things for you here, and checking becomes messy because if we check call, we run the risk of getting bluffed multiple streets and not being able to continue, and we're going to be folding the best handle. Like, what does he do with 6-7 of hearts if you check in this spot? He's probably going to bet at some frequency, and if he bets and we check call, he's probably going to just bet again. I mean, you can be checking here and having a check call range with hands like ace-5 yourself and 10x. You're going to have to check call some ace-x, like pocket aces, ace-5, you know, some backdoor nut flush draws, you know, ace-5 of hearts, whatever, ace-x of spades, just so that you can protect the times you have a hand like pocket kings, pocket queens, pocket jacks, 10x that wants to end up check folding on the next street. So this is just a little bit dicey. I just go ahead and bet here. All reasons mentioned. You know, you just win the pot so frequently, and you get to double barrel a decent percentage of the time. You know, if you can reasonably assume that your opponent's calling the flop with ace-x, 4x, and 10x, and he has very few nutted combos, then you're going to be in a pretty good position to barrel him on cards that don't really connect with two pairs, whatever else. He can fold 4x. He can fold 10x combos on the turn. He's never really going to fold an ace, so we don't expect that. That's okay. The 4 on the board, you know, at least cuts down on some of those combinations that were, you know, ace-x, ace-4, whatever. But I definitely see about this board texture for all reasons mentioned. And now the turn card, you know, he checks back. I mean, it's not amazing. You know, if he's checking back here, would he check back an ace sometimes? It depends on the guy. Some guys are, some guys aren't. I think that you can probably go ahead and double barrel, and if you run into an ace this time, no big deal. Having the king of hearts is reasonable, and that if the heart hits the river, it's a better card for you to bluff. You know, once he checks back, he's more likely to have second pair type combinations, and, you know, there's just... He could even have something like Queen Jack that didn't bet the flop now, and there's going to be more instances of those types of King X and Jack X Broadway combos just because of the likelihood that he's going to have offsuit combos in his range for flatting in the big blind. So yeah, I would just go ahead and double barrel now. Just bet the old 28 cents and then fire the river and hope you get folds from everything other than an ace. Take it down with our pocket queens on table 4. I didn't see what. Let me go back over here to the 10 deuce hand. It looks like we somehow. Hold on a second. Let me move this so that I can actually. Whoa, hold on. Nope, not trying to do that. Not trying to do that. It's just where the recording. All right, we'll just play it. Okay, all I was going to say here is that if he checked back, you can definitely double barrel the 10 deuce there as well, given that he's not going to have that many flushes. He'll have a lot of pairs or one diamond combos so that you can bet the turn and he'll call at a reasonable frequency, and then you can bluff the river a lot and get him to fold like ace of diamonds or pocket sevens with a diamond, whatever else. And he doesn't have all that many strong combos in this spot, so I would definitely take the opportunity when he checks back, especially if he had the lead pre-flop. Maybe it looks like he just kind of limped in or something like that, but definitely just attack that board texture when he's checking back that flop, especially if he's a casual player and he did end up limping in. Because if that's the case, then he's most likely not going to have that many strong hands, as a lot of casual players are just going to bet when they improve their hand. So just go ahead and attack there as well. When we raise it up with our king jack on table 4, I like that. And it looks like we're just checking down king high, and I don't really see much of a reason to be bluffing here. The reason why is because now is when your opponent is going to call at the highest frequency. Because if your opponent had a pair, he probably would have either bet somewhere or he's just going to call the turn and fold the river. And when those two things don't happen, when you're betting one time, you're just going to see him call. If he has a 10 here, he's just going to call. If he has a 9, he's just going to call. Even if he has a hand like 6-7 that completely gave up, he's just going to call. So I think that this is a hand that wants to continuation bet. And then if you don't continuation bet, definitely double barrel that turn card. You're going to get a really high amount of folds. And then if you don't, then just go ahead and check it down, because you're basically beating everything that isn't king-queen, which isn't always in their range. And then if they have a paired hand, they're going to call you at a very high frequency, and you don't have a way to make them fold on another street. So I don't like the way that this king-jack was played. I think we could have been more aggressive and taken down the pot. Same thing up here with the 10 deuce. We could definitely double barrel versus a check back. Whether it was a raise pre-flop or not, we're not going to interrupt the video or anything like that. Yeah, so if you double barrel there, he probably just folds that on the turn. And if he doesn't fold the turn, he's certainly going to fold on the river. So here, I'm okay with both plays. I don't mind just going ahead and betting like 36 cents with King-Jack offsuit. It's a paired board. Yes, people over-defend ace-X combos a lot of the time, but nonetheless, you have a lot of ace-X combos as well, and over-c-betting this board is not all that bad, given that you have a ton of aces, and you have bigger aces than he does, and, you know, I don't mind checking back my King of Clubs combos, and then just kind of checking or betting with the garbage combos, because if you check back here with the King Jack, you have some showdown value. I mean, you have the best hands some percent of the time. They have some hands that are pairs that won't get to showdown, and they have a bunch of suited connectors. So there's going to be a lot of hands that you can get to fold somewhere along the lines, and this is a hand where we don't really have much value checking it back other than maybe we get to showdown on occasion and we win. So if I have the King of Clubs, I'm more likely to just check it back, and, you know, if we hit a club, then we can call a bit more frequently on the turn with a hand that also has some showdown value anyway. It makes a little bit more sense to me than this type of a combo. So I just go ahead and bet the flop here. You don't have to bet big. It is a paired board, you know, like 36 cents, something like that. Slightly under half pot. We decide to check it, though. And in the King 5 up there, I'm fine just folding. It's close between a fold and a raise. Versus some half-stack bro, I don't mind just folding. If he ends up playing tight, just run him over, though, for sure. We check back. Turn card is not all that amazing. And the other dude bets. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to, like I said, you're going to win that pot quite frequently on the flop, even in a three-way pot. Once you check, then definitely you can go ahead and check the turn. It's more likely that pairs are going to call you down. Now there's two flush draws. On one hand, you aren't blocking any of the diamond draws or any of those club draws that they might be able to call and then fold with on blank rivers. So I kind of don't mind betting the turn again. But once you check the turn, obviously, we're just done with that hand. I guess the thing we're seeing in the first few hands here is that you could be a bit more aggressive, essentially. You got to bluff a lot, and when you have a lot of value combos, you're going to have to make up for that by having quite a few bluffing combinations. And these are just spots where you're going to win the pot a high frequency anyway. So you might as well go ahead and put those bets in. It's not really about whether or not they win at this point in time. It's about whether or not they're showing a profit long term. And it's pretty difficult to not see betting the nut gut shot up there, for instance, and attacking a check back range from a limper on the button. You know, you double barrel on the 3 diamond board. Just, you know, all good spots to just win the pot without a showdown. It's very difficult to make a hand that wants to showdown in this game. We raise it up with pocket threes. Get folds, fair enough. And folding ace-8, I'm assuming. Folding 10-8. We're going to raise or 3-bet with ace-jack offsuit. And 7-8 suited, I like a raise some percent of the time. Folding is okay, but it's still a very playable hand. And at a table with weaker players, you know, you got two, like, half-stack players. I'm probably going to open that hand up, especially with Pilot Avatar in the big blind if he's a weaker bro. Definitely want to isolate him. We have the 10-jack offsuit. That would have been a fair board to continuation bet with our 7-8, although not completely optimal. Better than nothing. Raise it up with 10-jack. And now this is a board texture where I don't really like continuation betting as frequently. Having the jack of diamonds is okay, but especially against a guy in the blinds, they're going to hit this board quite frequently. And, you know, it is a board where we get check raised quite a bit. Our hand does not play well, even if we hit a 10 or a jack. So if this board was, say, 4-2-2 rainbow, for instance, and we bet this hand, if we hit a jack or a 10, it's going to be the best hand way more often than if we bet 6-7-4 and then we hit a jack or a 10. Because then there's straight draws that get there, there's two pair combos and sets that already beat us, and there's a higher frequency of all of those types of combos. So this is a board where I like checking back, and then depending on what my opponent does on the turn, we can get active on the turn. These are board textures where when your opponent checks twice, they very often have a capped range. They're not all, you know, they're not going to have a huge hand very often, and we can double barrel versus check check. So I like double barreling versus check check ranges in a lot of spots, and this would be one of them. So I'm going to definitely just check back this flop, and it looks like we're going to continuation bet on this flop. See, this is kind of a, it's kind of playing opposites here. You know, the ace-4 was a pretty decent spot to c bet. This is definitely a better spot to just check back. So there's a little bit of a disconnect here between, you know, what you're doing as far as c-bets go. Like you don't c-bet the gut shot to the nuts, the rainbow gut shot, you know, that whatever. What was it? King Jack? Yeah, an ace 10, ace 10 4 rainbow, right? And then here we're just kind of betting in a spot where we probably should be checking back. It's good that we won that hand, but that's okay. And it's not about being results oriented. I still like checking back there. And oftentimes the way it works is that hands they would have folded on the flop, they're just going to check fold on the turn if they don't improve them. And hands that they would have not folded on the flop, they're going to bet on the turn. So it's kind of a free roll for you. When they check twice, you get to double barrel at a high frequency. Okay, we have a folding combo with our 4-5. We're going to go ahead and bet with our king of diamonds. So this is a spot where I do like betting because you have a good blocker in your 10 and your king of diamonds. Well, the 10 is a good blocker because you're blocking hands like Jack 10, 8 10, pocket 10s, which would probably be 3-bet at some frequency, and 9 10. You're blocking a lot of gut shots and straight draws and pairs. You're blocking a lot of hands that would continue that contain a 10, so that's a pretty reasonable card to have. You have an overcard, and you might have 2 overcards in some instances, and you have the king of diamonds. So you have a lot going on this board texture, and it's not one where they're, again, if they're 3-betting some of their pairs, they're probably not going to have pocket jacks. You have pocket jacks. They're going to have 3s, and they're going to have 8s at some frequency, but there's not a lot of 2-pair combos either out here. Maybe they have Jack 8 suited, but they probably don't have Jack 8 offsuit that much. Just go ahead and bet, and then this is a board where you can barrel with the king of diamonds when you hit that diamond, and there's a lot going on for you here. As far as a continuation bet goes, I like c-betting this board far more often, or far more than I like c-betting the last board texture for sure. And once he checks twice again, I'm just going to go ahead and attack with two barrels, basically. Seems like the players in this game are playing kind of on the passive side, just kind of check folding if they don't hit anything. And that's important to note. People are awful, not awful, but, well, I mean, sometimes they're awful as well. But they're often asking the question, do I play balanced or exploitative? And why? You know, when am I supposed to play balanced? When am I supposed to play exploitative? And everything is in relation to what your opponent's strategy is. So a good question would be to ask yourself, what's my opponent's strategy? And then what counters that strategy? So if your opponent is striving to play balanced poker, he's not really going out of his way to bluff you. He's going out of his way to have enough bluffs versus his value combos. So you should do the same thing so that you guys kind of bounce off of each other until one of you thinks they've found something to exploit. I'm not really flat calling here. Let's just talk about this. This is not very good, really. First of all, Big Slick, he's raising on the button, 2.5x. We have Crazy Merkle behind us. They're on the short stack. Flat calling here is not all that great with deuces. Deuces are going to be the worst set if you flop one. If you're in the big blind, I'm totally on board with a mixed strategy of 3-betting or flat calling with a higher percent of flat calls. But in the small blind, you just want to be 3-betting or folding. So generally, this would be a 3-bet combination. With a short stack in the big blind, you got to be a little bit more careful if they're a very active short stacker. So if that person loves just coming back over the top, shoveling it in, then I'm probably just going to put this in the folding range. But if my opponent has a full stack, or he's got $7 or whatever, or if they just have shown themselves to be very tight and we know we're just either running into hands or they're folding, then I'm by far just going to be 3-betting these combos from the small blind. The small blind is a very, very, very tight spot for us to play in. We're not going to be 3-betting that, we're not going to be flat calling, rather. We're going to be 3-betting most of the hands that we play most of the time. On occasion, you're going to find a spot to flat call, given that you have multi-way pot or deep stacks, or you have a player under the gun and you have a middling pocket pair. I mean, you can have a range for flat calling in the small blind, but it's going to be very, very small percentage of what else is going on. You're mostly just going to be 3-betting or folding with a fraction of flat calls. So just go ahead and be getting this out of here. Just go ahead and fold this one. That being said, we check, we get 3-way action. Not much going on King, Jack, Jack, Rainbow. Not really a board texture for us. Raise it up with our pocket 9s on table 4. And we're going to be folding King 7 offsuit here. So everything is in relation to your opponent's strategy. So if your opponent is just playing every hand and he's just going bananas, then clearly you want to play a little bit tighter in that he's playing a ton of hands. He's probably going to be splashing around a lot, seeing a lot of bets post-flop, and you don't really want to play that game. You just want to have stronger hands and then let him run into your value combos type of a deal. So, I mean, you can play exploitatively. Hold on, we got a couple pairs here. So I'm going to 3-bet with the pocket tens, but I would prefer to see a bigger 3-bet to at least 4x. You're out of position, and they're under the gun. You don't really want to give them better odds to play in position, especially when you have a vulnerable hand like pocket tens. So you're going to want to 3-bet much bigger. You're going to make this at least $1.20 in this spot. But yeah, just back quickly to balanced versus exploitative play. You want to think about what your opponent's strategy is, and if your opponent plays a balanced strategy, then you should also play a balanced strategy until you see something that you think you can exploit. So when you see a play from your opponent, ask yourself, is that within a balanced strategy? And if the answer is yes, then stick with your balanced strategy. And if you see something that's too far out or a combo he shouldn't be using, then you can try to move to exploitative play. And the same thing, people say, oh, I got to be balanced, in this spot. But it might be against a casual player whose strategy is to not be balanced at all, is to do whatever makes them happy at the time. So think about your opponent's strategy, and then what's the best way to counter that, or what's the best way to interact with that strategy, and then go from there as far as balance versus exploitation goes. Now with pocket nines, we're going to go ahead and flat call. You got full stacks here. You have a player behind you. He's got position, but he's only 5x'd it. You're just going to be flat calling with pocket nines essentially and playing post flop. Not always going to be easy, but we definitely want to flat call here with pocket nines, especially if the player behind us doesn't really have a history of slow playing that much. Especially since we've made it 2.5x pre-flop, and that the stacks are going to be a bit deeper than if we had made it, let's say, 30 cents and he makes it $1.50. So you have just deeper stacks. You have a guy behind you that might give additional action, and you have a reasonable pair to be calling with. You're just going to be flat calling here, basically, and 3-bet bigger. You could fold to 8-6 though. 8-6 of diamonds. Raise it up with ace-jack. Raise it up on the button with ace-7. This is a good spot for a 2.5x raise for sure. I don't think you can go ahead and continuation bet your ace-jack on 10-3-3 rainbow. They do have more threes than you do, but it's a very dry board texture. They're a half stacker. Chances are they're going to be playing very straightforwardly. You will get called by pairs. You have good blockers to a 10, so I could go ahead and double barrel here at a pretty high frequency and assume we're going to get folds from hands like 5s, 6s, 7s a good bit of the time. Doesn't always work out, but I like the bet. Raise it up with pocket 6s under the gun on table 3. Take that one down. But yeah, I think you're going to want to be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to non-showdown winnings and making sure that you have enough bluffs for your value combos. I like 3-betting here. I like 3-betting a little bit more than flat calling with the offsuit combo. I think both are reasonable. I think any option here is reasonable. Let's just say that. You can fold, you can 3-bet, you can flat call, depending on what your opponent's strategy is. They bet very big on that 9-10 board. If we do flat call, we definitely fold that board texture. And just keep in mind that they use that big sizing on a board texture where a smaller sizing would be perfectly reasonable. And again, if you're going to 3-bet here, I like a bigger 3-bet, but I don't really like this combination versus their position. So here's the thing. You've made it 95 cents against the same person that you just 3-bet a couple of hands ago, and this is not the best hand to do it with. You are 5-handed here. Big slick, he says sitting in. Maybe it was just 4-handed. Either way, if that guy was effectively on the button, this is perfectly fine. But if that guy was specifically the cutoff, then I'd be doing it a little bit less, or this would be the absolute bottom of my range. We cap out basically king 10 suited, whatever. But your 3-bet sizing definitely needs to be bigger. We'll just say that. And when they're in the cutoff, try to make it a little bit tighter of a 3-bet range. But like I said, if Big Slick was sitting there as well, that's perfectly okay. And again, I don't mind 3-betting here with ace-4 suited, and I like to make it 4x, $1.20. Now you make it about $1.50, $1.60. Definitely squeeze, though. I don't like the flat call here. This is something that I would be more likely to do in a live game than I would online, because the reason why live games are pretty juicy is because well, first of all, they're a bunch of weaker players for the most part, but you get a lot of multi-way pots. And online, when you're playing 6-max, you have less multi-way pots, which means there's less padding in the pot, which means it's more valuable to just take the pot down pre-flop. It's more valuable to get heads up. It's more valuable to win without paying rake. Just all of those things. If I were in the big blind, I would definitely have a mixed strategy here. And I think in the small blind, you just want to have an exclusive squeeze unless you're super deep and you think the guy's like four. I mean, you're just not going to have the variables that would make me want to flat call. So again, a spot where you probably just want to squeeze it up pre-flop. You know, make it a little bit difficult on them. Make it $1.50 to $1.70. Don't make it super easy for them to continue, and just go from there. So if we had squeezed pre-flop and we got called by somebody, we'd just check fold this board texture. This is obviously pretty terrible for us. We have no equity going forward. But yeah, definitely squeeze pre-flop. Flat calling is not all that amazing. Suited aces definitely function a little bit like pocket pairs in that when you flop the nut flush draw, you're basically flipping against everything or dominating their draws. And when you make the nut flush, obviously it beats all their flushes. So I mean, it's got relatively good implied odds, but it's a little bit more difficult to maneuver than pocket pairs. Pocket pairs are a little bit easier to play post-flop. But yeah, this is definitely a spot you just want to squeeze it up pre-flop. Let's see what happened with aces up there, but we had aces, so I'm sure it worked out, as it often does. And we're just going to fold the ace-4 to that big-ass bet. Same thing up here. You don't have to 3-bet this. I wouldn't be calling here. I would either be 3-betting or folding, but again, we've kind of covered this a few times. 7-8 suited. The problem with draws like this out of position is that you don't really have a chance to accrue much fold equity, and you have a much weaker range than the guy under the gun, and specifically, it just ends up being a big mess a lot of the time. So I would definitely just be giving up for the most part. I think you can overbet that river. No one ever really has a flush here, but overbet at least puts them in a position to fold a chop. So I like a big bet. Just go ahead and overbet. I don't think a pot size bet's going to get the job done. I just make it like $1.50 or something. I think you can value bet your 8 on this river when it checks down. They rarely have a better hand. I like an overbet there on table 2. Yeah, just go ahead and value bet your 8. Yeah, pretty easy spot for us to be value betting for the most part. They're not going to have too many better combos. They might even have a dominated 8 that calls. Raising it up with queen jack offsuit for sure. And we have ace jack offsuit over here on table 2. If we had the queen of hearts, we would check this flop quite a bit. As it stands, I think betting is just a better play. I think that you have, you know, a couple spots where you've decided to check where I would definitely be betting. And I think it's just that you can choose a better combination to take a checking line. So like I said, if we have the jack of diamonds and the queen of hearts, I don't mind checking because we don't care if a heart hits, and it gives us some protection from him having a flush, and it gives us a little bit more ability to continue on turns or rivers versus aggression, whereas this hand is going to have a really difficult time on turns or rivers facing aggression. You're not going to want to see a middling card, you're not going to want to see a king, you're not going to want to see an ace, not going to want to see a heart, but if you have the queen of hearts in your hand, that really shifts things. So, even though we're going to check call here, I just prefer to bet. That being said, we check call, we got a nice blank on the turn, so we check again. And I'm assuming our opponent is going to bet quite frequently. And we are just going to check call. It's interesting the small sizing he's using here. And I guess we're just kind of stuck check calling the river with these stack sizes and paying him off when he's got ace jack or whatever. He just has pocket threes. How much better would that have been for us if we had a heart in our hand? Would have been fantastic. Then when he hits his little flush, he'll even pay off a river bet if he checks back the turn or something. Some percent of it. Not always, but sometimes. 8-6, I'm fine on the button. Mixed strategy, fold it, some percent, raise it most of the time. Definitely continuation betting this board with this lowly garbage 8 high. He leads out, and I don't mind just raising here. Let's talk about this for a second. So if you have a read that your opponent is the type of dude that leads when he hits a little something, he leads a queen, he leads a king, and he's not going to fold, then clearly you don't want to raise. But if that's the first time you've seen an opponent do that, and you have a garbage-ass hand like 8 high with the 8 of diamonds blocking some of his continuing flush draws, whatever, he doesn't have ace 8 of diamonds, 8 9 of diamonds, you know, any of those 10 8 of diamonds, I'm fine just go ahead and just going ahead and raising it up. It's a spot where when you're facing this lead, you're going to have a lot of flat calls. You're going to flat call with king jack. You're going to flat call with your ace queens. You know, you want to have some raises. You clearly want to raise at some frequency with pocket threes and pocket queens and king queen and king 3 suited. So you're going to have some value raises here, and you can definitely have some bluffs here as well on average. Now, when you don't know what your opponent is doing or what his leading range looks like, I don't mind just taking a total trash hand here and trying to gather a little information. Just go ahead and raise it up and see if he's going to bet fold or see if he's going to bet always call, and then just completely give up if we brick. And this is the type of hand I wouldn't mind using for a play like that, rather than something that had more equity, which I would be more likely to call with, since we don't have that much information on what our opponent's range looks like when they lead. So I don't mind just folding this hand. Obviously, it's perfectly fine. We have 8 high. It's trash. And like I said, if you don't know anything about your opponent's leading range, you can just play your range and stay balanced. Or if you want to take a little shot, just use a trash hand like this that blocks some of his bet calling range. Because that way, if he re-raises you or something, you're not donking off equity. If you raise 10 jack, for instance, in that spot with the open-ended straight draw, and then he re-raises you, you're just like, that's miserable. All right, we're going to defend ace-7. We're going to play these hands, and we're going to wrap it up for today's video, guys. Been about a half an hour in. These videos go fast. We have a lot to talk about a lot of the time, but I would say a good overall theme here would just be a little bit more aggressive and choose a few slightly better combinations for the lines that you're taking. With 6-7 here, I kind of want to be more aggressive. I want to go back to the 6-7. So 6-7, what happened? We raised, right? Yeah, okay, get that got out of here. And then we have our 6-7, and we raise it up. We get flat called on the button. Yeah, we have an open-ended straight draw here, and you have 7 high. It's just a very clear bet on the flop. Even 3-way, even on that board texture, this is actually a pretty good combination if the turn is a club to just go ahead and continue barreling. Since you're not blocking their folding flush draws, you're not blocking any of their folding gut shots, nothing like that. This is a pretty good combination to be barreling with, just because you have an open-ended straight draw, and even though that's sometimes dominated, that's okay. It's not bad to keep barreling with this, and yeah, you're not going to get a queen to fold, but you are going to get a hand like 9-10 to call the flop and then fold the turn, and 10-jack, and there's just a lot of those types of combos that will exactly do that. They will call the flop, fold the turn, and then when they do have a flush draw, they're going to call, fold if they don't hit, and if a club hits, and they can have 8x of clubs and call, fold. And there's a lot of type of combinations here that you can get to fold by river, but more importantly, you could just win the pot now. You have an open-ended straight draw, you have an uncapped range. Just go ahead and bet. This is definitely a bet. Just bet like 60 cents. The board texture is relatively wet in nature, and that there are straight draws and flush draws out there. You're not blocking any of those calling gut shots. So it's definitely a good spot to be betting. Bit. A little bit too passive in a lot of these spots. Just go ahead and raise it up with the ace-deuce suited. Even though we're out of position, like that, I'd make it slightly bigger. Out of position, in position. And remember, when you made it 45, then that would add, why are we making it only 40 when we're out of position? You want to make that closer to 55. We get there on the turn, and I think I would just go ahead and lead now and then just fold to a raise. It's a spot where if your opponent has a flush or if your opponent has a straight, he's probably going to raise you a lot of the time. If your opponent has a queen or if your opponent has a heart, he's probably just going to call. And if your opponent has a queen or he just has a heart, there's a lot of the time he's going to take a free card. He's going to check back. I mean, we can have pocket nines and 8-9 and queen 9. 5x of hearts some percent of the time. It's a spot where if your opponent has a weak hand, then he's going to check back a lot, and weak hands can be up to a queen with a heart. So, it's a spot where he's going to have a more polarized range on the turn when he's betting, and he's definitely not going to raise you that frequently with that many bluffs. Of course, we're talking in the parlance of 10-L guys here. If you've got a guy who's a better player, then he's going to maybe have some bluffs on the turn. Maybe he's going to have jack of hearts to raise the turn. A lot of these guys are not going to do that. So I think you just go ahead and lead the turn, but I would have just bet the flop so we would never be here. And then I like checking the ace-deuce out of position on the ace-5-5 board. If he has an ace or a 5, your goose is cooked, and you don't want to create a gigantic pot out of position, and your hand is relatively invulnerable other than the occasional club, and the deuce of clubs is, well, I mean, it's an out, obviously, but no, it's not the end of the world. In that you can also hit an ace or a 5 on the river to make a full house, to beat a flush. So I think that this is a spot where your hand is relatively invulnerable, and it's a lot worse if it's let's say 7-5-5 and you have 7 deuce of diamonds. Then it's way worse, because then you can hit all the overcards. Here, there's no overcards. There's just a club that we're not happy with, and whatever. It's not the end of the world. to let a free card slide off here. So I'm definitely going to check. I like that. I think he just definitely, yeah, we missed the opportunity for some value in this spot. Definitely should have c-bet up there with the 6-7. But we're about 35 minutes in here, guys. We're just going to play this ace-deuce of diamonds hand and wrap it up. Hopefully there's been a little bit of helpful information here for you guys in this video. A little bit of help here and there. And we check again. We see one of the cards that we don't really want to see, but then he checks back, which means he probably doesn't have a flush here. I would definitely check this river. I don't think we're going to get called by very much unless he has a hand like 9x or now 6x. And I think that if he could still check an ace that beats us, and he could still bluff some. So he ends up having ace-deuce in that spot. We bet and we get called. I think if you had a bigger kicker, I would be on board with betting. But I think that this spot is still a pretty decent spot. Just go ahead and check and try to induce another bluff. Try to, just have a little balance to your range there. It's definitely a hand that can check call the river. And maybe he's tricky. Maybe he's tricky. Maybe check back a flush on the turn, and betting the river puts us in a tough spot when we get raised for sure. So it's not that you're always going to be raised there. It's just it's a pretty decent spot to just go ahead and check call when your hand isn't very far ahead of the hands he would be calling with on the river if you did bet. If there's a ton of one pair combos that he's going to call with, okay. But on that club turn, he could still have a bigger ace. You could still have a 5x combo. He could be slowly playing quads, still playing a boat, 9's full. And those are very few combos of those, but having a bigger ace is pretty easy for him to do. I would just be a little bit careful with that. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys next time. Ming the Merciless 93, PokerVIP.com.